Well, to break this all down for us a bit more, because it is complicated, we have James Creedon on the set. Hi, James.
Hi, Jeannie.
First of all, just give us some more background on this case.
Right, it is a complex one, and it all, I suppose, came to light in the public back in 2002. There was a bombing in Karachi, and 11 French engineers died. That was back in 2002. At the time, it was thought this was Al-Qaeda, it was some sort of terrorism attack. It later became quite probable that that was actually revenge for commissions that weren't paid in a deal that took place several years previously when Edouard Balladur was trying to, I suppose, get the coffers up a little bit, get some more money for a presidential campaign. Now, he ended up losing that presidential campaign. Jacques Chirac won, but they were political opponents on the right at the time. Now, when Jacques Chirac came into power, it looks like the commissions that were due to be paid on these deals for submarines and frigates, when Balladur was Prime Minister at the time, his defence minister who got that 2-year suspended sentence, he was the one who was more involved, it seems, in creating these intermediaries so that these public contracts for submarines and frigates could be, I suppose, signed off on with kickbacks, and that money then was able to be funneled into Balladur's campaign, which failed. So when Chirac came into power, that money that was due to be delivered never was. So there was a degree of vengeance, it seems, in the killing of those French engineers for money that was due to be funneled through in that sort of murky fashion. So that's what happened, and it drew attention to those kind of corrupt dealings. Edouard Balladur now has that case has been dismissed in his regard. It does seem that François Léotard, who was the defence minister, was much more involved in the mechanics of it at the time, and indeed he got a 2-year suspended sentence and a €100,000 fine.
This affair, of course, known as the Karachi affair, it just comes a few days after we saw a conviction against another former French leader, Nicolas Sarkozy, a president this time. It seems like the past is really coming to catch up with these politicians.
That's right. The chickens are coming home to roost. And I suppose back in the 90s, 80s and beforehand, there was a certain amount of corruption that went on in France when it came to financing political campaigns. It was maybe more, I suppose, overlooked, accepted to some degree, or a blind eye turned to it. And actually what happened was that the political left is not what would you say, immune from this sort of behaviour either. There were 2 scandals back in the 90s, one that concerned François Mitterrand on the political left, the Lucher scandal. He had to go on television back in 1997 and said, arms sales to Iraq in the 80s during an embargo, so that shouldn't have been happening, that there was strong suspicion over this, and that the Socialist Party benefited from kickbacks. He had to go on air and deny all of that. As a consequence of that, legislation was brought in France for financing election campaigns, financing political parties. And indeed, it was that legislation, because of scrutiny of misdeeds on the political left, that has now sort of caught up with the political right. So you could say that there was a systemic problem in France going back a few decades when it came to financing election campaigns and political parties. There was a degree of shady activity going on, and now a lot of that is coming to light. But certainly the political right, Nicolas Sarkozy, Chirac went back to 2011 when he was also convicted of corruption, and now Edouard Balladur, even if that case was dismissed, a laser spotlight is being put on those activities some decades ago.
It certainly has. James, thanks so much for breaking it down for us. France 24's James Creedon. Now, Northern Ireland